Now BBC News, Talking Business.
Hello everybody, a very warm welcome to Talking Business Weekly with me, Aaron Heslehurst. Let's go and take a look at what's on the show.
People want to fly and they need to fly. They need to connect for business. They need to connect to meet their family and they want to travel and experience other parts of the world.
Up and away, yet the global airline industry, it is soaring to new heights as millions of us look to take to the skies for a summer getaway. Record numbers of passengers, they're predicted to fly this year, with airlines raking in healthy profits and airports fit to bursting. But against a backdrop of war, economic uncertainty, and the year for global elections, can it continue? And with our climate in crisis, can any of it be done sustainably? I'm going to be discussing all of that and more, here they are, with a host of experts for our bumper aviation special. Also, I'm catching up with one of the longest serving airline leaders, the industry heavyweight, the big boss of Emirates Airline, Sir Tim Clark. Wherever you're joining me from around the world, once again, a big hello and a warm welcome to the show. Now, for many of us, it's that time of the year where we're checking our passports, getting our bags out of the cupboards and dusting off our shades as we prepare for a summer getaway, jumping on a plane in search of the summer heat or trying to escape it. The airline industry is now officially back on track after the dark days of the pandemic, and I tell you what, their outlook is very bullish. A record high of nearly 5 billion travellers are predicted to take to the skies this year, with the world's airlines expected to post over $30 billion in profits on the back of it. And that increase in demand, it's projected to continue, with passenger numbers heading in one direction. And that's up, with around 8 billion expected to take to the skies by 2043. Good news for the airlines, but it is raising concerns over its potential environmental impact. Aviation is currently responsible for around 2 to 3% of total global carbon emissions, which is significant on a per-head basis, as it's one of the most climate-intensive forms of transport. So, in answer to this, the airline industry has committed to a net zero carbon target by 2050. And the most significant current tool in the box to reach that is the use of so-called sustainable aviation fuel known as SAF. That's jet fuel made from sustainable sources such as agricultural waste. Currently, there are major hurdles over its availability, but significant progress is being made in its potential. And in fact, last year, we saw the first transatlantic flight by a large passenger jet powered only by those alternative fuels, flying from London to New York. Okay, so let's get stuck into all of this, and where better to start than with the voice for the airline industry. So I caught up with the big boss of the International Air Transport Association, of course known as IATA. Willie Walsh, fabulous to see you as always. And Willie, let me start with this, because on the show I've just outlined some of the huge passenger numbers and predictions from you, from IATA. So let me start with that, Willie. What do you see behind these phenomenal numbers, and where are the biggest areas of growth? Where are they coming from?
Well, it's great to see the industry back now in growth above where we were in 2019. It's taken a long time to get back, and still a number of challenges facing the industry, but demand actually quite strong right across the world. I think if you look at the Asia Pacific region, where it was slower to reopen, it is now gathering pace, but still some restrictions in place. Traffic between China and the US is still only at around 20% of where it was back in 2019. So I think there's still scope for growth, but the growth really is pretty much everywhere globally.
But Willie, do you think these phenomenal passenger numbers are sustainable, given what travellers will say are hugely increased airfares since pre-pandemic?
Everybody has suffered from inflation. It's not unique to the airline industry. And in fact, when we look at fares back in 2019 and today, they're just about keeping pace with inflation. So yes, ticket prices are higher than they were, but it doesn't appear to be impacting on demand. And I think it proves what we said right through that period of the pandemic, that people want to fly and they need to fly. They need to connect for business. They need to connect to meet their family, and they want to travel and experience other parts of the world. So it's good to see where it is.
Willie, are these airfares now the new norm? Because I know you and others have said that the airlines, they have to fund this greener transition, somehow.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Aaron. If you look at the profitability that we're forecasting for the industry this year in margin terms, and I think it is important to look at it in terms of the net margin, we're forecasting just over 3%, 3.1%. So a very, very thin margin for an industry that's as important as aviation. And if you consider the long-term outlook and the transition to net zero, we know that sustainable aviation fuel is very expensive compared to traditional fuel. It can be anything up to 6 times the price. And that's going to have to be paid by somebody. And given the margins that the industry traditionally operates with, I don't think there's any way you can avoid the reality of higher fares. I think this is where politicians need to be honest. I think some people have tried to portray this view that it's not going to cost us anything to transition to net zero. It will be challenging and it will be expensive, and ultimately consumers will have to pay more.
And I have to ask you, Willie, about Boeing, of course, one of the 2 major plane makers out there. Boeing keeps making the headlines for all the wrong reasons. I'm kind of wondering, is the industry, all of your members, are they confident in Boeing?
I think they're concerned given the problems that we faced and the speed at which progress is being made. They're cautious about the future. We want to see greater certainty around what Boeing will do. Personally, I am confident that they will address it. I see a clear determination on their part to put behind them all of these issues. I think they know what the problems are, and solving those problems will require some work, but it's not impossible to do. It just requires the right focus, the right attitude, the right culture. And I think Boeing is on the right journey at the moment. But we need, as an industry, to see a strong Boeing, and we'll work with them to get them to where they need to be. Because we can't have an industry that's almost totally dependent on one manufacturer. We need competition, and Boeing is going to play a critical part in the future.
Well, on that note, Willie Walsh, the big boss of IATA, always great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us, Willie, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay, so that's the overview for the whole industry and, of course, the problems of reaching climate targets. But how are the airlines themselves dealing with all of this? Well, to find out, I also caught up with the boss of sustainability at the world's biggest carrier, United Airlines. Lauren Reily, great to have you on the show. And Lauren, let me start with this, because United Airlines, the biggest airline in the world, your home market, North America, the biggest aviation market in the world. And Lauren, this phenomenal demand to fly, 5 billion expected this year. I mean, the industry is growing at great speed. So I guess it does beg the question, how can all of this be done sustainably?
Well, it's great to be here, and it's really wonderful to talk about this subject in particular. At United, we are very passionate about connecting the world and enjoying all the beauties of the planet. And our commitment, though, is to make sure that we do it responsibly and sustainably. As we grow, as we rebound from a historic pandemic and we go back to normal flying and hopefully continue to grow as an industry, we have a worldwide commitment across the industry to really develop sustainable aviation paths forward. And that's going to require a whole host of solutions, from sustainable aviation fuels to new fleet, to new technologies, all the way through electric and hydrogen and beyond. And as an industry, we're looking at all of those solutions.
Okay, Lauren, so the vast majority of the carbon footprint, it comes from burning fossil fuel, but we know sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, it's being touted as the ready-to-run option. But just for the uninitiated, Lauren, can you just explain to us what it is and how SAF saves on emissions?
Sustainable aviation fuels are pretty remarkable. So just to give you some context, for United Airlines, 98% of the emissions that we put into the atmosphere are from combusting jet fuel. So when you think about moving towards sustainable flight, what we're really talking about is finding a way to either use less fuel so we create less emissions, or replace the fuel with sustainable alternatives. And that's where sustainable aviation fuels comes in, SAF. SAF is chemically identical to conventional jet fuel, exactly the same, but it's derived from waste or renewable feedstocks. And it uses renewable power, a little bit of carbon capture, and all of these great new technologies to produce a jet fuel that today has up to 85% less emissions on a life cycle basis. And the challenge is that we simply don't have enough production coming online yet. And what do I mean by that? Let me give you a couple of numbers. Last year, worldwide, about 150 million gallons of SAF were produced, which sounds like a lot, and it's a massive progress over the previous years. But United alone as a single airline uses 4.25 billion gallons of jet fuel. And that's just one airline.
But why, Lauren? I mean, such a huge industry with such huge demand, why are they not ramping this up?
All of these technologies are very nascent. They're very early stage. And so we're essentially in the business of creating a marketplace for alternative fuels. So that's why we're working very hard with policymakers here in the United States, across Europe, and in geographies everywhere, so that we can help kickstart the marketplace through incentives, through mandates, with policies that enable us to scale sustainable aviation fuels so that we can have a robust marketplace.
Well, on that point, Lauren Reily, Chief Sustainability Officer at United Airlines, great to have you on the show. Good luck with everything. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Right, so we've heard from a major airline, but what about the airports? How are they gearing up for all of this new traffic sustainably? Well, to find out, I spoke to the big boss of one of the world's newest mega hubs, the CEO of IATA Istanbul Airport. Selahattin Bilgan, great to have you on the show. And Selahattin, let me start with this, because on this week's show, we're looking at this phenomenal demand for air travel that continues to rise. And this year, 2024, you, Istanbul Airport, a major global hub, you're expecting your passenger numbers to hit 85 million. Now, if you do that, you'll become number one in Europe, the biggest airport in Europe, taking the top spot from London's Heathrow. So I guess the question is, Selahattin, how do you do that? Are you ready?
Thank you, Aaron. It's very good. Nice to see you again. Actually, we've been quite prepared for this, and the project has been expecting large scale of growth from its initial start. And maybe you know, we've been the number one airport in Europe for the fourth consecutive year now with respect to the air traffic movements. And now this year, with this growth in air traffic numbers, the passenger number will follow as well. Istanbul Airport broke the record for daily passenger numbers last year in July. We are quite prepared to be the number one in Europe, and we are looking forward to be number one in the world as well.
We've also been looking, Selahattin, at the sustainability push by the aviation industry to improve its carbon footprint. And we know the new Istanbul Airport, you fly the flag as one of the world's most sustainable airports. So just briefly, can you highlight a few of the reasons why you're such a sustainable airport?
We are a pretty new airport. We had the chance to design and build the airport with the latest state-of-art technology. Building the latest airport has given us advantage, but at the same time, our mentality has always been to be sustainable airport from the beginning as well. Although we are a very young airport, we were able to go up to level 4 in ACI sustainability accreditation only in 3 years. That was again a record. And just to mention a few numbers, last year our traffic growth was like 19%, but we were able to decrease our energy consumption nearly 11%. We recycled more than 30% of our water from our roof. We were able to decrease our water footprint more than by 5%. Currently, we are investing in a solar power plant, which will be able to provide the electricity of the whole airport ecosystem from renewable sources. Looking at SAF, our airport has its own seaport, so we are able to connect our airport fuel farm from any seaport placed in any part of the world.
Well, on that point, Selahattin Bilgan, the big boss of IATA Istanbul Airport, fabulous to have you on the show. Good luck with everything, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Aaron. See you in Istanbul.
Okay, so there you go. That's Istanbul Airport, the home of Turkish Airlines, which, along with United Airlines and 24 others, is part of the world's largest airline club, Star Alliance. Spanning the globe, the network, it offers a unique view of the industry. So I decided to sit down with the big boss of Star Alliance. Theo Panagiotoulias, a real pleasure having you on the show, my friend. And let's start with this. Theo, we're looking at bumper passenger numbers this year predicted, 5 billion to take to the skies. I mean, it's incredible. And I'm just wondering, how are your members seeing things? And I guess importantly, how does Star Alliance help them to, well, how do you help them to meet this demand?
Well, thanks for having me, Aaron. Demand is really robust. The market is staying up really resilient. We're coming into a very bumper summer this year, which is great after all the challenges we experienced in the past. What is our role? Our role is to make sure that we look at the problems along the customer journey and deliver upon customer experience enhancements across those journeys.
And that's across all your members, right?
Across
the
all our
26 members.
Yeah. We focus on solutions, especially through technology. When you think about the booking experience, the customer experience, the connection experience, the loyalty experience, along that pathway, we look for problems and we look through technology to make it more seamless for customers.
But as the alliance, some will say, isn't that the actual airline's role? So where does that, where does that balance, where you want to make it seamless, but also the airline has a say in all of that?
Yeah, so the solutions we provide to the airlines are things that those airlines can't otherwise do on their own.
Right.
So I'll give you a really quick example. When you look at, we offer bag tracking now across multiple airlines. The various member carriers cannot do that unless they try and do it with all 26 members. They use us as Star Alliance as the conduit, and they connect into us, and it allows us to fulfill that for them across the entire membership.
How much is the capacity of airports around the world an issue for this growing demand?
I think it's always an ongoing issue, and you've got different geographies tackling this at a much early stage. Other geographies are playing catch up, but this is a very important issue, and the way to deal with it is to be making sure there is ongoing dialogue and understanding the repercussions and consequences if you don't have thoughtful planning to anticipate and capitalize upon that demand, which continues to grow.
And Theo, you and I are sitting right here in London. So I've got to ask you, how important is London Heathrow Airport to Star Alliance?
Oh, it's huge. It's crucial for us. This is the one market that we have 23 of our 26 members serving. Yep. So it's the busiest market globally for Star Alliance in terms of member participation. We have 20% of the seat share from London, and so it is critically important.
So Star Alliance, you have 20% of all seats going out.
Of London, so it's quite significant, and it's an important competitive alternative to the local market home carriers. But most importantly, if we go back to what I was referring to before, one of the main reasons why it's been a huge success for us over the last decade has been that focus on customer experience on multiple touch points, where we've got a connection center here that assists customers when there's a misconnection. We have Gold Track there for premium customers going through. And we have all this other customer experience infrastructure that we've invested into. And it's something we're very proud of. It is all about the customer. As I touched on at the outset, that's where the differentiation exists. And we look forward to another 10 very successful years at Heathrow.
But let's also be frank, Theo, because it's an airport not without its critics, right? I mean, a lot in the industry. I mean, an airport that charges very high fees to your members to land and take off and use the airport. And we've got the long saga of expansion plans, etc. All of that surely can't be that helpful to your members.
Well, obviously it's challenging, but we're also in pretty constructive conversations with Heathrow about these things, and we raise these issues with them. I would hope so, but I think they do. I think they recognise the success of having all the Star Alliance carriers under one roof at Heathrow, and all the benefits that come with that from a customer experience perspective.
Let's talk about Boeing. Of course, constantly making the headlines for all the wrong reasons. There's still safety concerns, the Boeing not delivering your members the planes that it needs. I'm just wondering what you are hearing from your 26 member airlines. I mean, do they have confidence in Boeing?
What I can tell you from our 26 members is that Safety is paramount. Everything else is a moot point unless you get that right. And I think you'll find that all our members have made that point and communicated that point very clearly to all aircraft manufacturers. And so I think from that point of view, we leave it to them to resolve. But I think from a membership perspective, that's been made very clear.
Well, on that point, and as a fellow Aussie, Theo, mate, a real pleasure having you on the show. Good luck with everything.
Thank you, Aaron. I
Talk to you
appreciate
soon.
it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
mate. Okay, so the airline industry, it's come a long way since being shuttered in the pandemic. Now leapfrogging pre-COVID passenger numbers with growth firmly on the radar. And one airline at the head of that journey is Emirates, recently reporting record income and profits as one of the world's largest international carriers. So to find out why and take the temperature of, well, all things flying, I decided to catch up with one of aviation industry's leading figures. Yeah, the president of Emirates Airline. So Tim Clark, always a pleasure having you on the show. And Tim, let me start with this. I mean, the world is in an interesting place right now, to say the least. I mean, nothing new for your industry, which always deals very well, really, with one crisis after another. But there's a lot up in the air at the moment, Tim. I mean, a huge year for elections, a lot of uncertainty and financial pressures. And yet, the bums on airline seats continues to be phenomenal. The airline industry at the moment is very strong. So I've got to ask you, Tim, what do you think's behind all of this?
Well, you probably hit the nail on the head when you said there's a lot of political uncertainty at the moment. People are facing multiple elections in Europe and the US, of course, as we know. It's a troubled planet. I think people are just getting on airplanes to go and enjoy themselves. It's probably a little bit of a facetious answer to it, but you know, the people that are traveling on leisure, visiting friends and relatives, occupying our premium cabins as well as the other cabins, has been quite a surprise to all of us, including not just Emirates, but the whole industry.
And Tim, there's been a lot of talk post-pandemic about the higher airfares. So I guess the question is, Tim, are the much higher airfares that you're all charging, are they sustainable?
There is currently a strong level of demand, as you mentioned. Supply is not back to where it used to be in many areas of the world, so I think that's having a upward pressure on prices. But you know, the economies are not exactly stagnant. The global economy is continuing to move despite everything that's going on. And you know, traditionally, when you get major election periods in the Western OECD economies, you tend to see a slowdown in demand. Well, the reverse seems to be happening. The more froth there is on the political side of things in Europe and America, the more people are traveling. So this is a new one to all of us, and you know, we are trying to adjust our capacity as best we can in Emirates.
But what are the holdups? I mean, your hurdles for Emirates' continued growth story, although I think I know the answer, right? It's the plane makers, Boeing and Airbus. And I mean, let's be frank, you can't get your hands on new planes fast enough, can you?
No, we should have had the 777-9, the latest 777 lookalike should have been delivered to us in April 2020. Now, if we get it by April 26, I'll be quite surprised. Now, how do we deal with that? In the short term, we are retaining a lot of the old aircraft, completely refurbishing them in the first stage, and then the second stage will be to knock them all out completely in the cabins and rebuild the cabins with brand new range of products.
But Tim, I mean, you have hundreds of new planes on order, and we all know that Boeing keeps making the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Airbus have big delays. If they're not delivered, the planes are not delivered to you on time, that is surely going to have a huge impact on your future strategies.
Of course it does. The order books for Boeing are colossal, single aisle and wide body. So the biggest single problem, once they crack the quality control issues, the safety issues, and all the systems and process issues that need to be brought into play in the factories, they then got to scale production back to where it was prior to COVID. And of course, that is probably the most Herculean task they've got in front of them, to meet the order requirements of the contracts that are already assigned. And on top of that, there are lots of carriers that want to buy more Boeing aircraft. They're being pushed out to the early 30s. 28, 29, 30. So for us, our delivery stream is critical to the point.
And Tim, let me end on this. In, say, 5 years' time, or at least by 2030, and I know, we all know, you're going to be retired by then, given the fact that you were going to retire just before the pandemic hit. But Tim, by 2030, what's the picture look like for the global airline industry?
The airline community is far more resilient than it ever used to be. It had so many knocks, whether it be wars, global traumas, you name it. You look back over the last 30, 40 years, and they've had to sort of keep going and navigate through all of that. So they've got some pretty skilled people now who can work through, whether it be the new sort of thing on the block, which is environmentalism, talk about turbulence, whatever it may be. So we're better at doing what we're doing. For me, if you can get through COVID and you can come out profitable as the airline industry, you can get through anything. And in fact, it tells you that you're resilient enough and you're strong enough to deal with anything. 5 years' time, it's going to be a good story.
Well, on that point, Sir Tim Clark, the big boss of Emirates, always a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, keep in touch.
Well, that's it for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can keep up with the latest on our global economy on the BBC website or the smartphone app. Of course, you can also follow me on X. X me, I'll X you back. You can get me at BBC Aaron. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
My dad was a farmer, but he also had a radio talk show for farmers who called in with their farming problems. He'd patiently listen to every conflicting account of what was and wasn't working. That was really influential to how I approached my journalism. Building trust by taking the time to understand a situation clearly before reporting a story. In a 24-hour news cycle, patience can be so frustrating, but it's a crucial tool. I'm Lucy Hockings on BBC News Now.
I see myself in the girls that we're fighting for.
Climate change is real, and we must act now.
Argument is less powerful than emotion, and negative emotion is more powerful than positive emotion.
More than anything else, when we have more feminist storytellers, things will change.
When big names talk, they talk to us.
Today we're looking at the state of British politics.
Asking, is technology ruining football?
Are we too obsessed with our phones?
Helen from Hull wants to know, how hot's the planet going to get?
And we'll explain why prices keep going up and up.
Also, Rach, did you know space has its own smell?
Really? What of? The world is fast-moving and can be confusing.
So let's talk about it.
5 Live Breakfast with Rachel and Rick. Listen on BBC Sound.